What is up, homies? Welcome back to another episode of the Daily Dose. We're coming at you again out of the book of Daniel. That's right, the book of Daniel. So this is day number 212. We've got Daniel 7 through 9 on the menu for today, and Psalm 57. I think that after today, we probably only have maybe one more day, maybe two, in the book of Daniel. And then we're going to keep it moving to the next book of the Bible. So today, we start off with Daniel's dream of four beasts, okay? And this, again, appears to kind of be a flashback to a little bit earlier in time. Where we left off, the Babylonians pretty much got taken out by Darius the Mede, by the the Medo-Persian Empire. And this section of Scripture goes back to the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, who was Nebuchadnezzar's, it says son in some places, but I believe he was actually his grandson. Anyways, so the beginning of chapter 7 says, in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream, and visions passed through his mind as he was lying in bed. He wrote down the substance of his dream. Okay, now we're about to get into some very interesting prophecy. This prophecy, in my mind, is adequate to persuade anyone of logical reason and thinking into believing the Bible is true and to coming to faith in Jesus. There are so many predictions that are made throughout the whole Bible, really, but particularly in the book of Daniel, predictions that were made ahead of time that it's just too much coincidence to be coincidence for it to all be right, okay? So, in this dream, basically four beasts come up out of the sea. You ever see any of those old Godzilla movies? Where they've got the voices dubbed over, and then like all of a sudden, they're showing the ocean over off the coast of Japan or wherever, and and you start to see this beast come up out of the sea, and it's like this fake plastic looking Godzilla, coming up out of the water, and everybody's like, "Oh, Godzilla!" Right? Classic. I love those old school movies. I love old school kung fu movies too, by the way. I don't know why, I just do. The old school ones where, they were spoken in a different language and they dubbed the English voice, English words, over the actors that are speaking in an obviously different language, and the mouth movements don't match up at all. I love those. One of my favorites is the Five Deadly Venoms. Any Shaw Brothers fans out there? Five Deadly Venoms, classic. So anyways, back to the whole Godzilla thing. So four beasts come up out of the sea, right? One of them was a lion with wings of an eagle, okay? And we see that its wings were removed, and it grew feet, and it stood like a man, okay? The second beast is a bear that was raised up on one side. So it appears to be a bear that is kind of leaning, right? Like one side of the bear was well more dominant than the other side, so much so that it was visibly obvious, okay? And this bear had 3 ribs in its mouth. Number 3, the third creature was a leopard. Leopards are super quick. They're very pretty and very majestic looking animals, right? Beautiful animals. This leopard had 4 wings and 4 heads. Interesting. Okay. Now, the last of the beasts, in particular, we're told, was terrifying, frightening, and powerful. The other beasts did not get a description like that, right? We just kind of read about their physical attributes. This time, Daniel is saying how this last beast made him feel and getting more into depth about the emotion, right? Terrifying and frightening. It had large iron teeth and 10 horns. And then, among the 10 horns, there was a little horn that came up. Then, 3 of the original 10 horns were uprooted, pulled out, and then we read that the little horn, I guess, could be seen better, and the little horn had eyes and a mouth, and it spoke boastfully. Okay? Very weird, right? This is a very psychedelic, bizarre dream. And then we go on to read that the beast was eventually slain, this last beast, and then it appears that Daniel saw Jesus approaching the Father, the Ancient of Days, and then people were worshiping, right? That's kind of the dream in a nutshell. Now, we get to a section where Daniel interprets the dream. Well, I should say the interpretation is given to him. There was someone standing by Daniel in his vision, and Daniel asked this mysterious person, what does this dream mean? And here's a little bit of what they had to say. The four great beasts are four kings that will rise from the earth. But the holy people of the Most High will receive the kingdom and will possess it forever. Yes, forever and ever. Okay, so just kind of a recap. This mysterious person, creature, being is saying, hey, each of those four beasts represents a different king or a different kingdom, right? Because when you have a kingdom, they have a king. You can't have a king without a kingdom, okay? But then it says the fourth beast is a fourth kingdom that will appear on earth. It will be different from all the other kingdoms and will devour the whole earth, trampling it down and crushing it. The 10 horns are 10 kings who will come from this kingdom. After them, another king will arise, different from the earlier ones. He will subdue 3 kings. He will speak against the Most High and oppress his holy people and try to challenge the set times and the laws. The holy people will be delivered into his hands for a time, times, and half a time. Okay, so let's start with this, okay? The last little sentence I read. It says the holy people will be delivered into his hands for a time, comma, times, like multiple, like 2 times, and half of a time. So if a time were to represent 1 year, you would have a time, okay, plus times, so 2, so 1 year plus 2 years, and then half of a time. So you've got 3 years plus half of a year, 3.5 years, right? Now, there are a lot of different views of eschatology, of the study of the end times, of what happens at the end of the age. Some people believe in a literal rapture. Some people believe in a 1,000-year millennium, based on things that we read in the book of Revelation, for example. There is some people believe there's going to be this massive battle called Armageddon. There's a number of different viewpoints, right? But one of the main, or one of the more primary evangelical views is that there's going to be this rapture of the church, right? Where people who are believers in Jesus, at some point, Jesus is going to come down, not come back to earth, but just come down, and that all of the believers are basically going to be whisked away invisibly and drawn up to Jesus in the clouds, and they're going to go away to be with Jesus, leaving pretty much unbelievers, anyone who is not a saved believer in Jesus Christ on the earth. And at that point, that is when a 7-year period is going to begin called the tribulation, right? There's going to be someone who pops up in the world who ends up being some sort of like a charismatic world leader that just fills a void, and he's able to unite different people, different countries. He makes this massive promise for peace to Israel, and all this other stuff is supposed to happen, right? Everything is going to look like it's going good. But this person who comes to power and sort of becomes a world ruler almost, this is going to be the Antichrist. 3.5 years into the tribulation, that is when the Great Tribulation is supposed to happen, and that's when the Antichrist breaks his deal with peace to the nation of Israel, and that is when all kinds of crazy persecution and other stuff is supposed to start, which will last for another 3.5 years if you go by that view of a more literal interpretation of the end times. So anyways, in hindsight now you'll remember, if you've been reading along, that the 4 beasts, they match up, they kind of go along with the dream about Nebuchadnezzar's statue that he saw, right? So the first creature, the lion, with wings of an eagle, right? The equivalent to this in Nebuchadnezzar's dream that he had with the statue would have been like the golden head, right? That represents Babylon. Babylon was the power from 605 until 539 BC. Okay? And okay, the second beast, a bear that was raised up on one side with 3 ribs in its mouth. Okay, now on Nebuchadnezzar's statue dream, this would have been equivalent to the silver chest and shoulders. This represents the Medo-Persia Empire. They ruled from 539 to 331 BC. Right now, mind you that this was given before anything happened with the Medes and the Persians, right? This was way beforehand. So how much prophecy does it take to say, oh, well, the lion with wings of an eagle, that represents Babylon, right? Well, I mean, that could have been anybody's guess. But here's where it gets interesting. This bear that was raised up on one side, right? So the Medo-Persian Empire, Persia was the dominant side of that duo, of that empire, right? So it was an empire that was made up, there's a fly, again, back chilling on my camera. I don't know why it's just hanging out on the camera. I don't know what it is. Sorry. Anyways, so Persia was the dominant side, right? The Medes were the less dominant. So that just goes to speak of this bear that was raised on one side. And how about the 3 ribs? Okay. The 3 ribs are 3 nations that were devoured by the Medo-Persian Empire. Okay. The first was Babylon. And by the way, Babylon is modern day Iraq, pretty much, and some Assyria. The nation of Lydia, which is now modern day Turkey, right? That was another one of the ribs, another devoured nation. And then Egypt, that was the third. So that's a pretty good description, right? You've got this bear that's lopsided, one side's more dominant, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth. And then you've got the Medo-Persian Empire who comes along. It's sort of a divided empire, or a composite empire of 2 nations, and one side is more dominant. And they ended up taking out 3 of the main dominant nations at the time. So that fits in hand with the prophecy, that description. Then, even further on down the line, a leopard, this is beast number 3, a leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads. This was equivalent to the bronze torso on the Nebuchadnezzar statue dream story. This represents Greece, the Grecian Empire. They ruled from 331 to 168 BC. Greece conquered the world in a short period of time. They were swift. They were powerful, like a leopard, right? Alexander the Great conquered the world in an unprecedented amount of time. Super fast, super fast. Now, the 4 heads on this leopard represent the 4 generals that would take over after the death of Alexander. So Alexander the Great died at a pretty young age, right? I think he was in his 30s, and he died. When he was on his deathbed, they said, who's going to take over the kingdom after you're gone? And he said, give it to the strong. So he had 4 generals, military generals, and his kingdom was divided up among these 4 military generals. So I think that they represent these 4 heads of this leopard, right? And then we get to this 4th beast that was terrifying, frightening, and powerful, with large iron teeth and 10 horns. And I know I'm going kind of long in this video, but it's super important, so I appreciate y'all bearing with me. So the iron teeth and the 10 horns. This was equivalent to like the iron legs and maybe the clay feet in the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had about that statue. This represents Rome. Rome was the world power from 168 BC until 476 AD. They had a very, very long reign. Now, these 10 world leaders that are mentioned, right? I'm not sure who those are. I think that those are people who are yet to come, people that we may not be familiar with. They may not even be born yet. The little horn represents the Antichrist, and And as we talked about before, the time, times, and half a time. So anyways, after this segment of Daniel, there is a vision of a ram and a goat. And then there's an interpretation of that vision. Daniel will go into a time of prayer. And then there is a section about the 77s, right? 77s, which is, most people believe, 70 periods of 7 years. So what is 7 times 7? 49. So 70 times 7 is 490, okay? So if you are curious about the 77s and exactly what that means, that is some more very interesting prophecy for you. I encourage you to go look that up in your own time, because that's all the time we got for today, my friends, my friends. But hey, thank you for being here. I appreciate you. Thanks for supporting us. And until we meet again, deuces.